Imagine coming home after a long day, expecting peace, and instead hearing words that flip your entire life upside down. She looks you dead in the eye and says, "From now on, intimacy happens only when I say so." No explanation, no emotion, like she's already moved on. At first you think it's just a phase, until you start noticing the signs, secret texts, nights out, new outfits she never wore for you, and then it hits you. You're not her partner anymore. You're her backup plan. But here's the twist. What if you didn't wait around? What if you left first and made her regret ever thinking she could play you? Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If it's your first time here, don't forget to subscribe and like this video, as every like truly inspires me. Please tell me which city and country you watch this video from. Now, let's get started. After a demanding day at work, I stepped into the house expecting nothing out of the ordinary. An uneventful evening filled with dinner, a bit of television, and possibly an early night. No heavy discussions, no conflicts, just the familiar, quiet routine. But something was off the moment I entered. My wife sat rigidly on the couch, arms crossed, her eyes locked onto the television with an unsettling focus, as though bracing herself for something unpleasant. I greeted her, but the response was barely there. Assuming she was in one of her distant moods, I didn't push the matter. I went through the usual motions, changed into something comfortable, sat down for dinner, until she finally broke the silence. Her voice was steady, devoid of warmth. "I need to make something clear." I looked up, waiting. "From now on, intimacy will only happen on my terms, when I want it, not when you do." There was no anger in her tone, no sadness, just a cold, practiced delivery, as though she had rehearsed these words in her mind long before speaking them aloud. I sat frozen, stunned into silence. Had something happened? Was she upset with me? What had led to this sudden proclamation? Yet, she offered no further explanation, her gaze never straying from the television, as though this conversation was nothing more than a formality. "Where is this coming from?" I finally asked. She shrugged. "I just don't want to feel pressured anymore." That word struck me. Pressured? I had never imposed anything on her. I had always respected her space, her moods, her boundaries, and yet somehow I had been cast as the problem. I leaned back, struggling to make sense of her words. "So, just to be sure I understand," I said slowly, "you make all the decisions, and I have no say." She nodded, still avoiding my eyes. "Yeah, that's how it's going to be." I should have been angry, maybe even heartbroken. But more than anything, I was confused. This wasn't a small adjustment. It was a complete shift in the foundation of our marriage. And the way she presented it, without any discussion or concern for my feelings, made it clear that my opinion didn't matter. She wasn't asking for a compromise. She was dictating new rules. That's when a thought surfaced, one I didn't want to acknowledge but couldn't ignore. Was there someone else? It was the only explanation that made sense. The sudden emotional detachment, the way she was laying down the law as if she had already moved on. It felt like she was establishing a new reality where I was no longer an equal, just an observer. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, so I let it be. Maybe she was dealing with something personal. Maybe I was misinterpreting things. But deep down, I already knew. I had seen this before. And the biggest warning sign? She wasn't afraid of losing me. A woman who still loves her husband, even in a difficult phase, would try to reassure him, to explain, to soften the blow. But she didn't. She simply declared the new terms and expected me to accept them without resistance. That night, I barely slept. The conversation played over and over in my head as I searched for a logical explanation. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe this was just a rough patch. But deep inside, I already understood the truth. When a woman no longer cares whether you stay or leave, she's already gone. The only real question left was whether there was another man waiting in the background or if I was just being kept around as a backup. In the days that followed, Everything on the surface remained the same. We didn't argue. We followed the same routines. But for me, everything felt different. She carried on as if nothing had changed, scrolling through her phone in the morning, going to work, coming home to sit in front of the TV. There was no awkwardness from her side, no hesitation. It was as if that conversation had never even happened. But I couldn't unsee the shift. Subtle signs began revealing themselves, things I hadn't noticed before. The way she was constantly glued to her phone, angling the screen away from me. The new outfits, tighter, more revealing, clothes I had never seen her wear before. The late-night outings with vague explanations that never quite added up. I wasn't searching for proof, but it was right in front of me. At home, everything felt transactional. We spoke when necessary, but the warmth was gone. She had no interest in meaningful conversations. If I asked about her day, her answers were clipped, minimal. If I suggested making plans together, she dismissed the idea, claiming exhaustion. Yet, that exhaustion didn't stop her from going out, dressed up, staying out late. And when she returned, there was no guilt, no explanation, just the quiet expectation that I wouldn't question it. That's when I knew for certain. She hadn't just drifted away emotionally. She had already checked out mentally. I started testing small things just to see how deep this detachment ran. One evening, I casually suggested taking a trip together, something to reconnect, to reset things. Her response? A shrug. No enthusiasm, no interest. And that was all the confirmation I needed. Not a flicker of enthusiasm. No forced grin, no reluctant nod of agreement. It was as though I had proposed an obligation rather than a reprieve. Something to endure instead of something to savor. And then there was the distance, not the physical kind, but a gap far more profound. She had drawn an invisible boundary and never strayed, adhering to a set of unspoken rules as if they were carved in stone. Any warmth that once existed between us had long since dissipated. No spontaneous embraces, no effortless laughter, no lingering touches exchanged in passing. Even the lightest contact, a hand resting on her shoulder, my fingers grazing hers, made her stiffen as if I were an unwelcome trespasser. Yet, despite the growing emotional chasm, she stayed. That was the part that didn't fit. If she had already detached, why remain? Why not sever ties and walk away? The answer wasn't love. It wasn't devotion. It was convenience. The lease was in her name, but I was the one ensuring the bills were paid, the fridge stayed full, and the little luxuries she never acknowledged always remained within reach. I was the silent force keeping everything running smoothly. She wasn't staying because she wanted to. She was staying because it required no effort, because I made her life comfortable. She had crafted the ideal scenario, a life where she could act as if she were unattached while enjoying the financial stability of a relationship. I wasn't her priority. I was her safety net, a contingency plan in case her other prospects didn't pan out. And once I saw it for what it was, I couldn't pretend otherwise. Every action, every disinterested glance, every excuse made it excruciatingly clear. She wasn't just detached. She was biding her time. Not for me, but for something, or someone, else. That realization shifted everything. I started watching, not from insecurity, but for confirmation. And it didn't take long. Her phone was never beyond reach. At night, I'd wake to see her in bed, her face bathed in the glow of the screen, fingers tapping out messages. If I leaned too close, the screen would go dark in an instant. One evening, as I sat beside her on the couch, I caught a glimpse of a conversation before she angled the phone away. It wasn't casual banter. There was an ease, an intimacy in the exchange that only comes with something more than friendship. Then came the sudden departures. Where we once coordinated our days together, she now had an endless string of engagements. Drinks with friends, work events, impromptu girls' nights that somehow always fell on weekends. And each time she left, she transformed. Not just a change in wardrobe, but an entire shift in demeanor. Perfume she never wore for me. Makeup applied with meticulous precision. Outfits carefully chosen, none of which she ever bothered with at home. She was dressing to impress, but not for me. At first, I dismissed my suspicions, told myself I was reading too much into it. Maybe she truly was just out with friends. But the truth has a way of surfacing, and one evening, it did. Another supposed girls' night, another vague excuse recycled from previous weeks. I had stopped questioning it. I already knew honesty wouldn't be part of the answer. But then she made a mistake. Her laptop, usually closed, sat open on the dining table. I wasn't searching for anything. I was simply moving it aside when the screen lit up. A message appeared. It wasn't from a friend. It wasn't about work. It was from him. No elaborate declarations, no secret rendezvous, just a simple, "Can't wait to see you tonight." That was all it took. I didn't dig further. I didn't need to. The truth had been staring me down for weeks. She wasn't waiting for me to leave. She was waiting for him to be ready. I had never been a partner. I was a placeholder. And in that moment, my decision was made. There would be no argument, no confrontation, no plea for an explanation I already possessed. What would be the point? Her choice had been made long before that message ever appeared. The only thing left was ensuring that when I left, it would be on my terms. The irony of it all was almost amusing. She had no clue that I knew. No inkling that the comfort and security she had taken for granted were about to disappear. There would be no dramatic breakup, no messy fallout, just a departure she never saw coming. The next morning, I woke before her. I made coffee, sat at the table, and started laying out my plan. Every step. How much cash to withdraw, which accounts to separate, which personal belongings to take. I would leave nothing behind that could be used as leverage. No ties, no unfinished business. She moved through her morning as if it were any other day, barely acknowledging me, her attention fixed on her phone, lost in whatever conversation held her interest. I simply observed. She truly believed she had it all under control. For the rest of that week, I moved in silence. Bit by bit, I shifted my finances into a new account. I secured a temporary spot to stay, just a brief stopover until I could establish myself somewhere more lasting. Quietly and methodically, I removed my essentials, documents, valuables, piece by piece, ensuring she wouldn't notice their absence. Each time she stepped out to meet her friends, I inched closer to my final departure. By the time the moment arrived, I had already detached myself emotionally. No sadness, no hesitation, just the satisfaction of knowing she had no inkling of what was coming. And then, I left. She was gone again, likely with him. That was my signal. I collected the last of my belongings, taking only the necessities, and left my keys on the kitchen counter. No note, no farewell, nothing. For too long, she had treated me as an afterthought, a placeholder until she was ready to move forward. So, I made the choice for her. I left first. Hours later, my phone vibrated. Once, twice, again. I ignored it. Then the messages started. At first, they were straightforward. "Where are you? Did you take your things?" But soon, the panic set in. "What's going on? We need to talk." I just smiled. There was nothing left to say. She had assumed she had unlimited time to figure things out, to keep me waiting while she secured her next move. She misjudged. The house, still under her name. The bills, her responsibility now. The stability she had enjoyed with my presence. Gone. Eventually, the calls and texts stopped. When silence finally settled in, I knew she had grasped the truth. She was never the one in control. I was. And the quiet that followed was the most satisfying part. With no more messages, no desperate attempts to reel me back in, I knew she had finally accepted that I wasn't returning. That was all I needed. I adjusted to my new space quickly. It wasn't luxurious, but it was mine. No more strained silences, No more underlying tension, just peace. And for the first time in a long while, I felt free. I didn't waste time reminiscing about her. I had already grieved the relationship while still living in it. By the time I walked away, there was nothing left to mourn. I focused on rebuilding, revisiting old hobbies, reconnecting with friends, and learning to enjoy my own company without feeling like a shadow in someone else's life. But, as I had expected, she resurfaced. Not directly, of course. That wasn't her style. She made sure I noticed. The new guy. Our mutual friends brought him up in conversation, unaware that I already knew. He was younger, more ostentatious, the type who thrived on attention rather than depth. The kind she had likely daydreamed about while still with me. I felt nothing. Let her have him. Let her believe she had traded up. I had no interest in watching the show unfold, but life has a way of revealing the truth. It didn't take long for the cracks in her perfect picture to appear. At first, it was minor complaints, how he was always out with his friends, how she didn't feel like a priority. Then, the real issues surfaced. Financial struggles, constant conflicts. She had exchanged stability for something superficial, and it was clear she wasn't handling it well. And then, the inevitable happened. She had assumed she was replacing me with someone better. Instead, she had been replaced. The moment she expected him to step up, to contribute, to be reliable, he did exactly what I knew he would. He disappeared. No conversation, no confrontation, just gone. She had counted on me staying while she made up her mind. She had assumed he would stay too, but he had no reason to. She wasn't his priority, just a temporary amusement. And now, with him out of the picture, she was left with nothing. I didn't reach out. I didn't gloat. I simply waited, knowing exactly what would happen next. And, predictably, it wasn't long before she made her move. Her safety net had vanished. The man she had pinned her hopes on had walked away the moment she became inconvenient. With overdue bills piling up and no one left to rescue her, she did the only thing she could think of. She reached out to me. One afternoon, her name appeared on my screen. "Hey, can we talk?" I stared at the message, then laughed. Of course. Of course she thought she could just waltz back into my life as if nothing had changed. As if I had been waiting for her to decide. I ignored it. A few days later, another message arrived. "I've been thinking a lot about everything. I think we should talk in person." This time, I responded. "About what?" She hesitated before replying. "I just feel like we ended things too fast. I miss you." For a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Near miss. Instead of answering directly, I shot back, "Do you miss me, or do you miss not paying rent?" She didn't reply right away. When she finally did, her response was weak, a flimsy attempt to act like money had nothing to do with it. "It's not about that," she insisted. I almost laughed out loud. That was rich. She liked to call them mistakes. I agreed to meet, not because I was considering anything, but because I was curious to see just how bad things had gotten for her. And the moment she sat down across from me, it was written all over her face. She looked exhausted, uneasy. The effortless confidence she used to carry had vanished. She tried starting with small talk, pretending she cared about how I'd been. I wasn't interested. "What do you want?" I cut in. She exhaled sharply. I miss you. I think we ended things too soon. Maybe we should." I couldn't hold it in. I laughed. Loud, unfiltered. People around us turned to look. She tensed. "What's so funny?" she asked. Wiping away an invisible tear, I smirked. "You think we ended too soon?" "That's hilarious." She shifted in her seat, clearly uncomfortable. "I'm being serious." "Oh, I know," I said, my grin unwavering. "That's what makes it so damn funny." Her face darkened. "You don't have to be an asshole." I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice but keeping my words razor sharp. "Oh no, sweetheart. You don't get to play the victim here." I let the moment stretch just long enough before delivering the real blow. So, tell me, when exactly did you start missing me? When the bills started stacking up? When your rebound ditched you? When you realized you weren't as irreplaceable as you thought? Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. I shook my head. You assumed you had better options. You thought you were trading up, but turns out you were just a placeholder for him, the same way you tried to make me. Leaning back, I let the smirk linger. And now, you're nothing. She dropped her gaze to the table, blinking rapidly, as if willing herself not to cry. I felt nothing. Standing, I tossed a few bills onto the table. Hope you can make rent, I said. I hear your mom's couch is free. Then I walked away. Later I found out exactly what I had expected. She ended up back at her mother's place, working a cashier job at some grocery store, the kind she used to sneer at. Meanwhile, I moved forward, happier than ever. She thought I'd be her safety net. Turns out, she never had one to begin with. This story has come to an end. Life is a series of choices, and every action has consequences. This story illustrates how a lack of sincerity, manipulation, and selfishness can destroy relationships. Love is about mutual respect, support, and appreciation, not convenience and calculation. When one partner stops valuing the other and the relationship turns into a cold transaction, separation becomes inevitable. True strength is not in revenge, but in the ability to walk away with dignity and no regrets. It's crucial to recognize whether someone is truly by your side or merely using you as a temporary convenience. Real freedom lies in knowing your own worth. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you liked this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you. You work night shifts just to pay the rent, and when you finally come home, your wife has thrown a party full of strangers, with random girls passed out on your couch, and she doesn't even bother to explain. Once, you both dreamed of a future together. Now she laughs in your face and invites her ex over for coffee. What do you do when you realize that love has become a trap? This isn't a story about happily ever after. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If it's your first time here, don't forget to subscribe and like this video, as every like truly inspires me. Please tell me which city and country you watched this video from. Now, let's get started. The door creaked open on rusty hinges, and Derek froze, hit by a wall of sour beer stench, and a bass so heavy it rattled the floorboards like an unwanted pulse in his skull. After enduring a brutal 12-hour graveyard shift, this was the last thing he needed, or could tolerate. His marriage to Bonnie, now 18 months deep, had begun in soft tones and tender moments, quiet dinners, shared dreams, and easy laughter. But in the past half-year, everything had corroded into arguments, sharp silences, and unspoken resentments. Bonnie, ever restless and unwilling to be pinned down, had been testing every limit he had left, dismissing his concerns, trampling boundaries, and treating their home like a stage for her reckless whims. Tonight, though? Tonight felt like his limit had finally been reached. Stepping further in, his boots crunched over tortilla chips ground into the floor like confetti after a riot. His eyes scanned the wreckage, bottles scattered and spinning underfoot, sticky pools of beer reflecting the flicker of dim lights, and a forgotten slice of pizza left to dry out on the rug like an afterthought of some unrestrained night. The speakers trembled with music, no doubt turned up hours before she crashed. On the couch, two women he'd never seen before lay tangled together in sleep, arms and legs flung in all directions, one of them smeared with mascara trails that gave her a ghostly, battle-worn look. Still weighed down by his work bag, Derek stood motionless, his jaw locking tighter the longer he stared. Same mess, same careless script. Bonnie hadn't messaged, hadn't warned him, hadn't even tried to make the place remotely livable before he walked in. This wasn't a first. It was at least the third time she'd hosted a party he didn't know about, turning their home into a disaster zone. But something about tonight felt different. Something snapped. He no longer felt like this was his home, just a guy working overtime to keep a roof over their heads, while Bonnie acted like she lived in a college dorm. Letting his bag slide to the floor, the drop muted by the pulsing music, he muttered under his breath, "This is insane." Careful not to trip over a beer can, he pushed open the door to the bedroom. There she was, Bonnie, sprawled diagonally across the bed, arm thrown over her face, still dressed in a sparkly top that looked like it belonged to yesterday. He cleared his throat, loud and sharp. No reaction. So he leaned down, giving her shoulder a firm nudge. "Bonnie, wake up. We need to talk." She groaned, peeling her arm away and blinking up at him, her smudged eyeliner darkening the circles under her eyes. "What, Derek?" she rasped, voice rough, irritation flickering as she massaged her temples. "What now?" He scoffed, gesturing back toward the living room with tight, jerky movements. "I come home after working all night and this is what I walk into? You want to explain that to me?" With a roll of her eyes, Bonnie flopped backward on the bed, only to prop herself up a moment later, raking her fingers through her tangled hair. "Relax. It was just a girls' night. You're being dramatic." "Girls' night?" His voice dropped low, tight with anger. "Bonnie, I'm the one paying the bills. I'm keeping this place running. The least you could do is let me know before you turn our apartment into a dump. If something gets broken, if something worse happens, it's on me. Always on me." Bonnie shot up to her feet, her eyes sharp, her arms crossed like armor. "Oh, here we go again. You and the damn rent. You think because you pay for stuff you get to control me? Newsflash, Derek. I live here too. I don't need your permission to have fun. If I want to have people over, I will. Deal with it." Her words sliced the air between them, daring him to fight back. Staring at her, a mix of exhaustion and anger swirled in his chest. He dragged in a slow breath, trying to hold it all in, and then turned, walking stiffly back into the chaos of the living room. The two strangers were still out cold on the couch, one of them softly snoring. Derek crouched beside them, keeping his voice steady but firm. "Ladies," he said, tugging lightly at the edge of the blanket covering one of them. "Sorry to wake you, but it's time to call it a night. I'd appreciate if you could help tidy up before you head out." Before they could respond, Bonnie stormed out of the bedroom, her voice cutting through the music like a knife. "Derek, are you kidding me? What are you doing? Stop embarrassing me," she snapped, her hair wild, her fists clenched at her sides. "Let them leave. I'll call a cleaner. You don't have to act like you run this place." The two women, now awake, exchanged awkward glances, clearly uncomfortable as tension filled the room like smoke. Derek stood, grinding his teeth to keep calm. He tilted his head back, staring at the ceiling for a long breath before exhaling hard through his nose. "Fine," he said at last, his voice strained, words sharp as glass. "Do whatever you want, Bonnie. You always do." Moments later, her friends shuffled out, mumbling soft goodbyes that echoed down the hall before the door clicked shut behind them. Bonnie collapsed onto the couch without a word, pulling out her phone and scrolling as if nothing had happened. "There, cleaning service is on the way. Happy now?" she muttered, eyes locked on her screen. Standing in the center of the mess, Derek rubbed his forehead, fighting to stay composed. "Bonnie, those services aren't cheap," he said, voice tight with restraint. "We can't afford to waste money every time you decide to throw a party." She shrugged, not bothering to look up. "Well, I'm not cleaning it. I'm wiped out. And honestly, it's not a big deal." His mouth opened, then closed, fury and hurt choking his words. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked, rising louder. "Not a big deal? Bonnie, I'm the only one working to keep us afloat. And you treat this place, treat me, like it's nothing." It had been 6 long months since Bonnie last held a job, and though Derek wasn't mentioning it to make her feel guilty, he needed to address their money troubles. He was grinding through endless night shifts just to keep them afloat, while she carried on as if there wasn't a care in the world. Tossing her phone onto the couch, she shot him a sharp glare. "Oh, for God's sake, Derek. Stop acting like some tight-fisted miser. I'm not a kid for you to boss around." Derek exhaled slowly, his hands curling slightly into fists as he fought to stay composed. "I'm not trying to boss you around," he said, voice steady but laced with strain. "I just wish you'd loop me in before making decisions, like throwing parties or hiring cleaners, things that impact both of us. I'm only asking you to talk to me first." Bonnie leaned back, crossing her arms, a mocking smile tugging at her lips like she was daring him to keep going. "I don't need your permission to live my life. This is my place too. If I want to invite people over, even my ex, I will." Her words sliced through the air like a knife. Derek's eyes widened before narrowing, a flush of anger rushing to his cheeks. "Your ex? Are you serious right now?" His voice sharpened, rising louder than before as his restraint cracked. "You don't get to treat me like that, Bonnie. You know damn well that's wrong." His jaw tightened, fury threading through every word. "Bringing up Dominic just to mess with me? That's more than childish, it's vicious. I'm the one paying the rent, keeping this place together while you've been out of work for half a year. The least you could do is show some respect." But Bonnie only leaned in closer, her smile hardening. "Oh, please. I pull my weight. I'm the one who makes this place livable. You're welcome, by the way." Her sarcasm hung in the air, thick as smoke, as the clutter and disarray of the apartment seemed to bear witness. The stained carpet, the worn-out furniture. Rising abruptly from the couch, she brushed past him with a sneer, muttering just loud enough to cut deep. "I'll do whatever I damn well please." Derek stood frozen, his chest rising and falling heavily, her words weighing on him like lead. The walls seemed to press in tighter, the mess of the room closing around him. For the first time, it occurred to him that this fight might already be lost. The days that followed were a blur of silent warfare. Neither spoke a word. Derek stewed in quiet resentment, while Bonnie carried herself with smug indifference, as though nothing could touch her. But the silence between them was anything but peaceful. It was a fuse burning toward an inevitable explosion. And then, a week later, Bonnie lit the match. Determined to prove she could do as she pleased, she invited Dominic over, clear as a slap in the face. Derek stumbled through the door at 7 p.m., drained from another brutal shift, only to be greeted by a scene that stopped him in his tracks. There they were, sitting in the kitchen like it was any other day, coffee cups in hand, laughing like old friends. Dominic leaned against the counter, casual and self-assured, while Bonnie giggled at something he said. Derek's stomach twisted painfully. "What's this?" he asked, voice low and tight, barely holding back the storm brewing inside him. Bonnie twirled a lock of hair around her finger, giving him a smile that dripped with false sweetness. "Oh, Dominic just stopped by for coffee. We're catching up. Still friends, after all." Dominic gave a slow, smug sip of his coffee, his eyes glinting with amusement, as if he owned the place. But to Derek, this wasn't about coffee. It was a punch to the gut, a deliberate show of disrespect. Squaring his shoulders, Derek's fists clenched at his sides. "Dominic," he said sharply, each word clipped and controlled. "Get out, now." Dominic raised an eyebrow, pretending to be confused. "Whoa, man, chill. We're just talking." He took another slow sip, clearly savoring Derek's reaction. Bonnie chimed in, voice sugary but laced with venom. "Relax, Derek. We haven't even finished our drinks." That was the final straw. Derek strode across the room, snatching the mugs from their hands and dumping them into the sink with a sharp splash. "There, now you're done," he bit out, slamming the mugs down hard enough to make them rattle. Dominic's smirk faded slightly as he stood, holding up his hands in mock surrender. All right," he said with a low, dark chuckle. "Message received. See you around, Bonnie." With a cocky wink, he strolled out, leaving a heavy silence behind him. Bonnie didn't flinch. She just crossed her arms, an insufferable smirk still on her lips. As the door clicked shut, Derek spun toward her, his voice rising in anger. "What the hell was that, Bonnie? You think I'm going to stand here while you bring your ex into our home like it's nothing? That's over the line." She stared him down, cold and unmoved, as his anger surged, months of frustration crashing over him. She met his every word with an icy wall, shrugging, rolling her eyes, refusing to meet him halfway. Finally, when she seemed to sense that he was about to break, she stood abruptly and snatched up her purse. "You know what? I'm done with this. I'm going out with my friends. You should probably calm down, Derek, because you're losing it." With a victorious smirk, she brushed past him and out the door, leaving him trembling with rage in the kitchen, the sound of dripping coffee echoing like a taunt. An hour later, in a house that felt like a tomb, Derek sat alone, the fight still vibrating in the walls, and something inside him broke. Enough. Grabbing a duffel bag, he stuffed it full of clothes, work boots, and anything else he could throw together in a rush. He didn't pause to look around, just walked out and let the door click shut behind him. The next morning, bleary-eyed from a sleepless night in a run-down motel, Derek reached for his phone and punched in the landlord's number. "I want out of the lease," Derek said flatly, his tone stripped of any emotion. The landlord blinked, caught completely off balance. "Wait, what do you mean? You're serious?" Derek didn't flinch. "Yeah, you can talk to Bonnie. She's staying. Let her handle it." And just like that, he ended the call, leaving the landlord in stunned silence that never had a chance to stretch. Meanwhile, as the clock crept toward 11 a.m., Bonnie finally stirred from her friend's guest bed, her head throbbing from the alcohol-fueled haze of the night before. Her attempt to drown out anger now turned into a pounding reminder of it. Groaning, she pressed her fingers to her temples as her phone buzzed insistently on the nightstand. Squinting through the headache at the glowing screen, she saw the landlord's name flash. "Hi, Bonnie," he said, his voice careful but edged with urgency. "We need to go over the lease." Her stomach twisted. "Derek's gone. Can you come by?" he added, the words hanging in the air. "What?" she breathed, sitting up straighter, shock beginning to settle in. "Give me a second to figure this out," she mumbled, cutting the call short. She threw on yesterday's clothes in a rush, panic growing heavier with every step as she raced home. Something felt wrong the second she walked through the door. The apartment was too quiet, as if it already knew what she was about to find. His jacket wasn't hanging by the door where it always was. The work bag he never left behind was gone too. Heart pounding, Bonnie yanked open the closet door. Half empty. His side was cleared out. "He's just trying to scare me," she whispered, forcing her hands to stop trembling as she grabbed her phone and called him. The call rang until it went to voicemail. She called again. No answer. A cold wave of dread slid down her back. This wasn't some empty threat. Her fingers flew over the screen, firing off desperate texts. "Where are you? Please, let's just talk. You're overreacting." She paced back and forth, her eyes locked on the lifeless screen, hoping, praying for some response. Then finally, a ping. One message. Short, final. "I'm done living in a marriage where I'm disrespected, pushed around, and humiliated." The words hit like a punch to the chest. Bonnie stared at the screen, her breath catching. Slowly, she dropped onto the couch, the same couch her friends had crashed on just days ago, and let the truth wash over her. She had crossed a line she couldn't uncross. Her endless games, the constant need to control, had pushed him too far. And now, she was left alone in a home she couldn't afford, stripped of the confidence she always used as a shield, leaving only fear and regret in its place. The next day, she sat across from the landlord in his small, cluttered office, her stomach churning as he slid the lease across the desk. The rent glared up at her, numbers she knew she couldn't possibly handle without Derek. She stumbled through weak explanations, but there was no avoiding the truth. She couldn't stay. Leaving the office, a moving deadline looming over her, Bonnie felt like she was carrying a weight she couldn't put down. As for Derek, it was as if he had disappeared. No messages, no calls, nothing. Then, days later, her phone rang, an unfamiliar number lighting up the screen. "Hello?" she answered, her voice tight. The voice on the other end was sharp and professional. "This is Derek's attorney. I'm preparing the divorce paperwork. You'll be served soon." Before she could speak, the call was over. Divorce. The word echoed in her mind like a slap she never saw coming. For the first time, a crack appeared in the mask she wore so effortlessly. Had she really destroyed everything? With nowhere left to turn, Bonnie packed up what she could carry and moved back into her friend's spare room, the same one she used to crash in after wild nights she laughed off. Only now, the fun was gone. The divorce moved quickly. 2 weeks later, in a stark, fluorescent-lit courtroom, a few strokes of a pen ended it all. No house to split, no savings to fight over, just a broken marriage, dismantled in front of a judge. Derek moved into a small apartment, bare walls, an old couch, a lone lamp casting dim light across the room. It wasn't much, but it was his. Even though Bonnie's betrayal left a hollow ache inside him, his friends gathered close, buying him drinks, telling him he'd make it through. "You'll get past this," they said. And though he wasn't sure if he believed them, he wanted to. Meanwhile, Bonnie struggled to keep her head above water. She took a grueling warehouse job, long hours, heavy lifting, just to afford rent on her friend's couch. When she was out with people, she kept up her usual bravado, shrugging it all off, flashing her signature smirk. "Derek couldn't handle me anyway," she'd say, tossing her hair like she didn't care. But at night, lying alone on a borrowed mattress, reality broke through the lies she told herself. She had thrown everything away. Months passed, quiet, slow. Derek, too, began to rebuild. The sting of what happened dulled with time. He found a rhythm in his small apartment, and though the emptiness lingered, it didn't suffocate him anymore. Eventually, Bonnie clawed her way out of the warehouse and landed a job as a barista at a cozy cafe downtown. The hiss of steam, the grind of coffee beans, something about it soothed her, let her breathe again. Then, on a crisp fall afternoon, the cafe door chimed. Derek walked in. He looked different, lighter somehow, like someone who had finally let go of something heavy. He moved casually toward the counter, scanning the board before ordering 2 coffees to go. Behind the register, Bonnie froze, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for a cup. Their eyes met, and for a moment, everything else fell away. She wasn't the fierce storm he had known, the woman who tore through every room she entered. "Hey," she said softly, managing a small smile as she keyed in his order. "Didn't think I'd see you here." She hesitated, then added quietly, Maybe we don't have to let the past keep chasing us." It wasn't much, just a fragile olive branch. But it was something, a small chance for peace, if not forgiveness. Derek met her gaze, his expression composed yet soft. "Hey, Bonnie," he greeted, his tone steady and smooth. After a brief pause, a small, polite smile flickered across his lips. "Take care of yourself, all right?" With that, he silently slid his card across the counter, grabbed the coffees, and turned to leave. There was no anger in his steps, no sign of pain, just a quiet, definitive goodbye. You could see he had let go. Bonnie stood motionless, watching as he walked away, a sudden tight knot forming in her chest. Almost unconsciously, she edged toward the window, peering out just in time to catch sight of him stepping onto the sidewalk. Beneath the awning, a woman stood waiting, bright, at ease, her face lighting up as she spotted Derek. She laughed casually, reaching for one of the coffees he carried. 2 cups, meant for 2 people. The sight hit Bonnie like a slap, her stomach twisting with sharp jealousy. She backed away from the window, her head spinning. Already? The words screamed through her mind, raw and bitter. He's already with someone else? Anger surged through her as she stared blankly at the espresso machine, its steady hiss a dull backdrop to her racing thoughts. How can he act like I never meant a thing? Like I didn't even exist? But as another customer stepped up and she forced her lips into a mechanical smile, a harsher truth gnawed at her. It wasn't Derek who was trapped in the past. It was her. And the hollow ache pressing against her ribs wasn't something he had caused. It was something she was holding on to herself. Still, after that unexpected encounter, she couldn't shake the image of him. Calm, composed, so obviously over her. The thought bruised her pride in ways she didn't want to admit. She wasn't about to let him be the only one moving on. No, if he could do it, so could she. And she would show him, and herself, that she didn't need him. Her mind wandered back to Dominic, the charming, familiar option. Maybe there was something left there, some ember she could reignite. So she reached out. Light, flirty texts, casual suggestions to meet up. Dominic played along, replying with that easy confidence she remembered, agreeing to drinks or coffee. For a moment, Bonnie felt a rush of satisfaction, like she was finally getting somewhere, as if she was reclaiming control. But it didn't take long for cracks to show. Dominic chuckled at her jokes, nodded at the right moments, but there was a distance between them, an invisible barrier she couldn't cross. Their conversations stayed shallow, missing the spark she was searching for. One night, after another lukewarm meetup where he dodged every subtle hint she gave, her patience snapped. "Dominic, what's going on?" she blurted out, hands on her hips, frustration boiling over. "I've been trying here, and you're acting like we're just buddies. I want more than that." He leaned back, a slow smirk spreading across his face, as if he had been expecting her to crack all along. "Look, Bonnie," he said, his voice flat, without a shred of softness. "I'm not looking for anything serious with you." Then, with a lazy grin that made her blood boil, he added, "If you're up for a night or two, fine. But that's all." The words slammed into her like a blow, her cheeks burning with humiliation and anger. "Unbelievable!" she snapped, grabbing her bag with shaking hands. "Enjoy being alone, Dominic." She stormed out, slamming the door behind her, leaving every last hope of something real with him in the dust. Still stung, Bonnie threw herself into dating apps, determined to prove to herself, and Derek, that she could move on. Swipe after swipe, she filled her calendar with dates, desperate to fill the hollow space in her chest. But reality set in fast. One guy spent the entire dinner rambling about conspiracy theories that made her skin crawl. Another arrived late, drenched in overpowering cologne, and still had the nerve to insist they split the bill on a cheap meal. Date after date fell flat, and each time she trudged home, she felt emptier, more worn down. It finally hit her. Meeting someone decent wasn't going to be easy. The truth stung deep. Her friends rallied around her, sharing their own war stories of awful dates and trying to reassure her that good guys still existed. But their words felt thin, like trying to patch a sinking ship. And when the chatter faded and she was left alone in her apartment, her thoughts circled back to Derek, steady, kind, and genuine. She had let someone good slip away, someone who had truly cared, someone she hadn't valued until it was far too late. Looking back on her string of failures, the truth was clearer than ever. Someone like Derek wasn't just around the corner. Finding a man like that could take years. Or maybe, Bonnie realized as the weight of it sank into her chest, it would take something even harder, learning to be okay on her own first. This story has come to an end. No matter how much love there is in the beginning, without respect, support, and mutual effort, a relationship is doomed. You can't carry a marriage on your own while the other person destroys everything you've built together. Sometimes it's better to walk away than to endure humiliation and keep waiting for someone to change. Value yourself. Learn to say enough in time, to save not just your life, but your soul. Love is not pain and struggle. Love, above all, is respect. Remember that. And if you find yourself in such a situation, don't be afraid to choose yourself, because in the end, you are the one person you will live with forever. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you like this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you.